Dark day. I was in Auckland yesterday, and Tony was on tenterhooks because I said I might not make it. So, but it was a day like this where daylight was actually nighttime. So, if you're having trouble waking this morning, you look outside, you can see why. So, welcome for here. Look, I'd like to start with the karakia, and Liz, thank you for offering to lead us off on it. That would be great, but I'd invite everybody to join in.
Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga, kia mā kina kina,
ki uta, kia mā taratara, i tai.
E hi aka ana te atakura, he tio, he hoka, he hauhu, ti hei mauri ora.
Thank you for that, Liz. Well, it's a great day. We've augmented the team by one, by Wendy joining us, Wendy Venter over here on my right. Wendy joins us as our new independent, as collegial independent. It's always great to have a friend on the committee, not because these guys are unfriendly, but actually it's great to have. Yeah, I'll be sent for correctional training later, will I? As Rebecca, that'll be right. It is great though that we can augment, and I'm appreciative that council is prepared to have two of us on the committee, and it's tremendous that Wendy joins us. So Wendy, I said a 15-second introduction, somewhere out to 3 minutes. So perhaps you'd just like to introduce yourself, please, and that would be wonderful.
Get this right first. Tēnā koutou katoa. Ko Mount Everest, ko Ganga Te Awa, ko Delhi, India, Bharat, te whenua. Tupu, no te whanganuia tāra o, ko Wendy Venter, tōku ingoa. Ngā mihi nui, kia koutou katoa. Delighted to be here. Won't take up any more time other than say that I've been a Wellingtonian for, since the late 80s. I was born and grew up in India, as my pepeha said, but it's very much, this is where is home. Thank you for the opportunity to essentially contribute, and that's what I'm here to do.
Thank you, Wendy. I said we'll give her an easy ride today. Yeah. So, first up and first chance to have a look at a set of minutes. So, Wendy, I have nevertheless encouraged you to find your voice and to contribute as you feel capable or confident in terms of the meeting. But you're a full member, and we're just grateful that you're here and welcome you. So it's great to have you here. Apologies, Liz, you may need to shoot through depending on how long we go, which was your message to the chair. I get that. We'll see how we go. No pressure, that's right. I've been given a time. Are there any other apologies I need to consider? Oh, one from there. Thank you from Tori. And anybody else? Ray's going to be late, right? Okay. Brilliant. Well, look, can we just sustain those apologies? I'll move that. Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Tony. I'll put it Sorry, Wendy, you can see I'm already in trouble. It's this blue thing here. Can I even tell you how to vote on this one? I'll put the motion. Please all push your buttons. So obviously Ray can't vote. He's not here. Tori can't. And Iona is here. Okay. Right, and the motion is passed. That's great, thank you. Are there any matters of coming up on the agenda that people need to declare interests for? There are none, that's great. The minutes of the last meeting, the 28th of February, I'll move from the chair that we accept them as a accurate record of the meeting. They were previously circulated. Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Liz. Is there any discussion on the accuracy or detail of those minutes circulated? There being none, again...
Chair, just given I wasn't there, I'll abstain from
Fair
this
enough.
motion.
That's a good point. Is there an abstain button? We'll note your position, Wendy. That's okay. You can't vote. I get that.
Sorry, we can't people to abstain. I'll just get Sean to...
You can't allow somebody to abstain?
Yeah.
Oh, no standing orders. Well, that's interesting. Okay. I think there's interesting. It is interesting, actually. Yeah. I learn as well. Okay. I'll have to ask you to vote, Wendy. Sorry about that. Can I therefore put the motion, please? All those in, well, with your machine. Thank you, and the motion is carried. Thank you. Are there items on the agenda? Not on the agenda. Nobody's raised anything with me. Iona, thank you for your email. We have included that in to staff. Your suggestions in terms of when we get to the risk paper. Kim and Richard are aware of that, and we have circulated that. I have had no request for public participation. So that gets us then into general business, and the first one is the Assurance and Business Integrity Update and approval of the 23-24 work plan. G'day, Rich, how are you?
Kia ora koutou. I'll take the paper as read. Just want to emphasise that the paper does also include, and you will have seen, the streetlights response review that we didn't emphasise at the front of the report as much as we should have done. I'll take responsibility for that. The report itself identifies a number of systemic failings, but more importantly, it identifies the solutions. And I think there's a lot of action underway to lift risk management across council. You'll have seen, those of you that were on the committee over the last couple of years, our risk management maturity score has increased considerably. I think it was from 1.9 to 2.5 on a 5-point scale. There's several actions underway across council to lift identification of issues. We have Kim will talk to it in her paper about a risk and issues roadshow across council. There's also automation of complaints so that some of those dots will be connected and escalated that weren't being done so far. And importantly, there's also a cultural piece to encourage the speaking up and for people leaders to ask people what issues are there, so to potentially identify uncovered issues. That's the streetlight support. A couple of other things to mention in my paper. The audit plan, there is some flexibility in there. I wanted to highlight in this year's plan an additional piece of work that's we're just about to start on Haining Street, which is one of the Te Kāinga programme. It's a lessons learned review looking at the negotiation, delegation and decision making around around Haining Street in particular. And the last thing I'd just like to highlight, we had one last-minute return on the elected members' gift disclosure, which shoves the completion rate up to an all-time high of 93%. So, well done.
Can you add that on as a number? Brilliant. Thank you, Rich. Appreciate that. So it's a fulsome report. As we discussed in the pre-meeting, it's an omnibus report. So, look, I do propose that we just break it down in terms of discussion. So first of all, I'd like to just focus on the reports that you have prepared in the last period, which obviously also includes the streetlights. Then I'd like to deal with the proposed work plan going forward. So members, are there questions or points you'd like to raise about the work program as carried out in the last quarter by Rich and his team? Tony, away you go. It looks like you were about to say something. No. Oh no, you're not. Okay, rightio. Rich, I'd like to. Oh, sorry. Did I see a hand up? I'd rather go last. So, in your hands, Laurie. It's a shy hand. Yes, yes.
I'm not a member, so it's a.
You're welcome to join in, though.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Kia ora, Richard, and thank you for the report. Much appreciated and good to see the progress. So I just wanted to know, and it may have been in there because I must say it was a bit late last night when I was reading it, but how will we report back to council on progress? And yeah, what, and so progress of replacement, but progress on also how the new recommendations are being implemented.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor. There's two parts, I think, to your question. One is the technical fix, which is briefing through Siobhan and Brad's team. My team, we report back on all audit reports. We track the recommendations. So we'll be focusing on the processes to improve risk management and report back to this committee. I imagine through another committee. Siobhan, if you want to speak to that, how we'll update on the progress for the 17,000 streetlights.
Yes, so that'll be reported through, it will be the long-term plan and finance committee, because we're treating it as a priority investment project, so that you get the reporting along with all the other significant projects.
Okay, so
Yep.
Thanks, Laurie. Any other questions? Yes, Iona.
Paper?
I'd like to focus
streetlights?
at this stage, Iona, on the work that Rich's team has done in the last quarter, or which includes the streetlight report at this stage. Then we'll deal with the future program
Right.
going forward.
Sorry, I was doing my amendment. The officer wanted something added. Look, I appreciate the work, but I'm really concerned by this report. So there's a number of issues. One, it doesn't even have a name, like who did it. It's elegantly written, but it's very, very brief. To me, it just leaves a whole lot of questions unanswered. There seem to be really no consequences for what will be a very expensive fix. And I guess my overall question is really how are we going to lift our game on doing our own reviews? I mean, I would have actually expected it would have been done independently, because we're at fault here. We should have got someone to look at it. So I'm going to have real problems accepting it.
I'd like to reflect, and this is, and so you are perhaps pushing me into the charter and the next thing. Let's remember that it was carried out by Rich and his team, and they have this quasi-independent role as internal auditors inside the organisation. So while we can debate should it have been done externally or not, I just want to record my recognition that Richard and his team have a slightly a different position within the organisation, which is quasi-independent. So it has been done by somebody that is outside of the actual delivery system and mechanism of councils. I wonder if there's any other comment, though, you'd like to make to Iona's points, Rich?
We did consider an external reviewer coming in, but because it was looking at internal processes, and we've done similar reviews of other issues that have arisen in the past, we used our internal resource. We're well equipped to do that. We have unrestricted access to management through our independence that we have, and I think it took a long time to do this review. We were very thorough and robust, and these are our findings. So we were quite challenging. We didn't water down our findings.
But can I clarify? There's no consequences for anyone.
Perhaps I can jump in here, Iona. This report is really about lessons learned and how to avoid problems like this reoccurring in the future. It's not let's call it a blame game where people are held to account in that sort of way. That is not really the purpose of such a review. There are other mechanisms within the organisation for handling those sorts of things, and that sits with the chief executive and the management structure. Not a report like this is looking at systems and processes, what changes need to be made, and from a lessons learned perspective.
So, and then my other question really is, what else are we going to find out about? Because, look, I can't refer to the matter publicly because it was done in public excluded, but I'll raise it later again. We had another issue the same week, which is going to cost us money. How can we be confident that we're not going to get more stuff being relayed to us? You know, having read the papers, I know you're on a process journey, but look, it's not actually very good.
In addition to the four prongs I talked about earlier when I introduced the paper, we have an audit that's part of this year's work plan, which is looking at the complaints process. Across council, there's many different routes that issues get raised. And that we've just started that. We will make some more recommendations about how we can unearth issues before they become, unearth risks before they become the issues.
And it's not really, public complaints fine, but it's really about our processes. We shouldn't have to rely on the public complaining.
Our own processes, as I said, we've got those prongs. We've also got the My Safety, which is the new health and safety app, which, again, joins the dots and escalates up to the right levels.
Perhaps the other thing I'd just mention, and Richard did touch on it, we already have started much greater awareness within the organisation around those operational risks, how they're managed, how they're escalated, and how we deal with issues. And you're always going to get variability across a large organisation in terms of the approach to that, and that's what we're trying to do, is get consistency through an educative process, providing key managers and staff with the tools that they need to be able to think about sort of things that they're dealing with and how to escalate them, how to manage them. And I would just say, to your point, Iona, I'm not sure that the organisation could ever guarantee that there will be never anything that happens or goes wrong, right? It's a large, very complex organisation, but we are looking to absolutely minimise that and make sure that, as far as possible, that those things don't happen again, where we have analysed what the root cause is and put in place steps to avert that happening in the future.
Yes, Tony.
Yes. So first of all, I mean, this is quite an important incident, and I think what you've found in my reading of the report is a pretty straightforward report, and it's pretty honest. I certainly think that people who want to understand a bit about what really happened should read this report. And gaps were found, and you've identified the gaps, and that's the most important thing, I think, and we should recognise that. I also think under the new risk framework, this report, I think, has got a few shortfalls. I think Councillor Pennant has pointed out that we want a little bit more clarity around a couple of things. I would certainly agree that we want a little bit more clarity about exactly who did the report, because we want to make sure that that we know that people did. I mean, the team is fine, but I think some explanation, some authorship, some ownership, because we are talking about safety. So we want to make sure that it's being done well. So I think there's a bit of a gap there. I also think, more importantly, in terms of consequences, I'm not so much interested in consequences, but I do, when you look at the findings, want to understand the so what bit. So they've certainly got responding actions, but what's missing for me is how will we know as an audit committee that those actions have been executed or completed or not completed. So there's a gap there on individual things that says you will, our measure or our, it's a wee bit like a KPI, but that we will know that this is done and we report it back this way so that it becomes more of a follow through, because it's, you find a gap, it's actually about fixing the gap and focusing on that. Now, there are possibly consequences for this occurring. I think one of the things that does make me lie awake a bit at night is to think about what else, which is exactly, because we found this, but it was found. We had seems that you've identified a systematic issue where a process gap meant that we didn't identify it proactively, and we always want to do that. For me, the key finding, which is that we should treat near misses, I think they call them, incidents which, if a person was in the wrong spot, could have really hurt them or worse, that we should treat them as if there was a person there. Okay, and so good on you for saying that and saying it out loud. It's a hard thing for any organisation to be self-critical, and I think you actually have done pretty good at that. So good on you. But like I say, the follow-up consequences are things that are things that are missing. And I think one other thing which I was hoping to see is a little bit more of a retrospective piece of work. It's one thing to say from now on we're going to if this thing happens, we're going to put it through a proper process, it's going to be registered here. But I haven't seen, and it probably happened and you just haven't reported it, a look back over the past year or so about what else, what other things were potential near misses, and to give some assurance that there's nothing else that's sort of lurking out there. So for me, this is a good report, okay? I think that's got a few gaps. When you do this big piece of work, and it is a big piece of work for an internal team, it's hard to get it all right. So I'm going to support this report, but I just want to note those particular points that if those can be taken into account, I think that would make it even better in terms of the process. Thanks.
Perhaps I'd ask Richard just to respond how we report back on internal audit reports and the findings, because they do come back in terms of progress against the recommendations, Tony. But I'll just get Richard to explain that.
Thanks, Stephen. We do report back on each audit on the high and medium rated findings for each one. We'll probably, because of this report and the significance, will be more fulsome in the explanations when the actions have been taken. I think for others it's a very brief closed door otherwise. I've got to say one of the reasons why we decided this should be an internal was time. We wanted to make this as quick as possible. Contracting and bringing in an external advisor would probably have added another month to the process. And given our knowledge of how things work here, that was one reason why. We do, the report says it's an internal audit report. We don't put the names of the individual auditors. There are three of them in the team. My name's on the front as information, manager risk and assurance, but I think that's probably how we should keep it, rather than putting the auditor in the spotlight.
Thank you for that. Are there any other questions? We're still in the first part of Rich's paper in terms of both the report. I was very interested actually in the other ones as well. But look, I just want to reflect and I think clearly, Rich, you're right. You'll report back to us, and we do actually have a motion to that, an amended motion to that in effect on this. And I think you can sense for the combination of reasons that actually went, and I just went to the appendix which looked at the timeline of events. The challenging part about this was we knew about it. The organisation knew about it, but it didn't get to the right levels. So it actually means your complaint process, which is not the only way, and I take your point, Iona, is not the only way we should know about the condition of our assets. But it's actually still nevertheless a really important way to know about the condition of our assets. The escalation of information, the insight that the complaints or a request for service, whatever nice words we want to put around it, is actually mission critical for us. So I've been a bit naughty because I'm now looking at what you're going to do next year, but it does make then that actually the consequences which you've raised are really important. So we're going to be very interested in actually that complaints process, or whatever you want to call it, review. I mean, one of the other consequences is the funding side, so we start to think about the financial risk as well. So that will be of interest to us as well, but that's something that you will be discussing. So thank you, Tony, for your positive view that this is an in-depth and that it is actually honest. We have been caught short on this one. So this committee naturally will be keen to keep ourselves abreast of the remedy, which is great. Thank you. Are there any other questions? Look, there's the Toi Paniki. There's the other ones there that went through. They seem to be going straight forward. If there's no other questions, I would like to then just tip over then into the second part of Rich's report, which is actually the forward-going program. Yeah, sure. On what? Oh, okay. Yes, that's fine. Yeah, cool. Good. Okay, I appreciate that point. Okay, so any questions or points people would like to make about the forward work program? Not at all? We're happy? I want to just reflect and pause. This is a really important little decision that we're going to make, because while we're focused on risk, Rich's work is actually a window for us to gain assurance, or perhaps some other form, perhaps it's not assurance, but assurance that our controls and our risk management is effective. So I do want to just recheck. Do people have comments? And I think, Sarah, I saw your hand first, and then Tony.
Oh no, I've had a more general comment. Sorry, it will be more appropriate for the overall work program for the committee.
Okay, fine. Thank you, Tony.
Yes, I just wanted to ask you a comment, because one of the things that's a bit front of mind with Council at the moment is the financial element of how we are going forward. So I just wanted to look at, in terms of your assurance program in 23-24, whether you could just explain a little bit more about how you're going to look at how it will give some assurance around the finance elements of the council, because I see there is this PSR budgeting and reporting but there's credit control operations and financial delegations, but there's nothing particularly there around financial sustainability or anything. Is that in the work program?
Our focus that we've picked out, there are, as you point out, elements of the financial business operations. Audit New Zealand will review, as part of their statutory audit, the sustainability, the annual plan, long-term plan, and provide assurance over that. So that's probably more in their domain than in our program.
Yeah, perhaps I'd just add, Tony, that that whole process of building the long-term plan has many kind of review points in it, and the ultimate one being obviously our audit. But along the way, the financial strategy is a key moment for that whole debate and discussion around sustainability. But it does ultimately rest on that audit opinion in terms of our long-term plan. However, Andrea may wish to add some points as well.
I probably don't have too much more to add over and above that. The financial strategy, it will be a key area of focus for our auditors, and ensuring that what we have prepared in terms of our financial strategy and the financial information in our long-term plan is consistent, and it's consistently prepared. So that's one critical step that they'll give assurance over. The other critical step they'll provide assurance over is looking at our assumptions around the preparation of a financially prudent plan. So they will look at how we've asserted that, and they will assess whether they think the plan is prudent or not. That's part of their core role. Yeah.
Yes, Laurie.
Thank you, Richard. I'm very interested in the climate response part of this work plan. So I just wanted to understand, would that include both mitigation and adaptation? And what kind of, do you have an idea of, the main recommendation looks like it might be coming through the papers, but what kind of recommendations might fall out of it?
It was a tough one to come up with an audit that looks at the strategy as a whole. I think in our risk reporting, our strategic risk, we have one is called inadequate response to te atakura, or inadequate. So there'll be a lot of reporting through that channel, which is outside of the audit. So this is narrowing down into something that's auditable, and I think mitigation and adaptation will be part of that. So when we look at the quality of the commentary in papers and in reports, we'll consider both. Thank you.
Any other questions for Rich? Yes, John.
One item in there you've got is governance reporting. What does that actually entail?
The one that says error bookmark not defined. Is that the one? Take responsibility if that didn't update the table. I've removed that section this year because we have, towards the end of today's agenda, the forward work program, which shows everything that the team reports up to this committee. It used to be a list of what we would report and when, but it's covered elsewhere in the agenda. So, good point.
Right. Just a couple of comments from me. Firstly, you've mentioned the complaints process, and I think we've thrashed that one reasonably well, so I'll be very interested in that. I just wanted to compliment you that you're going to have a look at the keener operations. I'm very keen that your work is as real time, to use an audit phrase, in other words, as close to events that are relevant as they can be, and the fact that we open it next week, I think, is that right? And it's for business. I think the timing is good that you get in there and do that in early stage, so that we as both management and governance can have assurance that is something which we hope is totally used, is actually safe and secure, which is great. Just on page 29, it's really just a small picky point, where you talk about internal audit, which focuses, as you say, on operational risk. I think can we just use the word risk, because I would hope our work also focuses on strategic risk, not just operational risk. And even though we perhaps haven't used the word strategic risk, the information that Kim is bringing us is stuff that we call strategic risk, and I know some of them are operational in nature, but there's a sense to which your work is trying to also help us have assurance that work, those controls, are also operating. So unless you've got a violent objection to that, Rich, can I just suggest we lose the word operational? Look, and a couple of minor points. On page 35 of my agenda, and this is a very helpful schedule because it sets out the assurance you have provided over the last few years. I didn't actually check which was the earliest that you've gone back to, but also where we're going. I just want to leave this as a couple of open thoughts. The first one is the Matao Aranui, the Māori outcomes issue, for which you generally just talk about an awareness and thinking as you report. I'd just like to pose the rhetorical question, and Liz, you may have a comment on this, is that enough? And I wonder in this day and age whether just having an awareness is sufficient for this council to have assurance over its addressing both its legal obligations and its aspirations relative to Māori. So I'll leave that as an open question, and anybody else wants to raise that or comment on that.
Perhaps, Bruce, can I comment? Because we have, it's actually one of our Chief Executive's KPIs to come up with a reporting framework around that area and some others, key strategy. And there is a report, I think, coming very soon to the LTP Finance and Performance Committee around that in terms of progress. Right. So there is a different kind of mechanism, and it's aimed at the at our strategy in that space.
Well, that's good, and perhaps it'll be interesting to see how that works its way through. I guess I'm reflecting, Stephen, elsewhere. I see internal audit does have a role in looking at actually the pursuit of I will call them Māori outcomes in organisations, and I think that may be something for a future consideration. But as I said, I'll leave it more as rhetorical at this stage or on the table to think about. The other thing, Rich, is the one below, which is dealing with the strategy and governance. I'm always conscious. You've helped me kick off our internal self-assessment about our risk maturity. Is there any thought about any formal sense of risk maturity and where we should be in 3 years' time?
That's so with the enterprise risk maturity assessment that we do annually, that we have targets set out in there. I think, is that in the next work paper, Kim, or it will be reported in September?
Sorry, yeah. I was actually wondering whether there was scope for potentially, and I'll leave it as an open item, for actually an external review.
Okay.
Are we doing it right? Are we integrating risk management effectively into the organisation? I think it would be worth thinking about that. We're a couple of years into, dare I say it, my chairing of it. and actually as we try and as we try and move and enhance things, it may be that we should be considering that at some point in the future. Wendy, you've got a comment you'd like to make?
Yeah, just one comment, just endorsing what you've just said, Chair. I think it's useful to have an external check-in on something that's core to essentially the risk management framework. And I think for me, drawing the connection back to the discussion that was questionings and discussion over the streetlight report, one of the key things for me was how the lessons learned, how the issue escalation processes work and the risk escalation processes work more broadly in council. So there's a sort of comfort and assurance that could be picked up through such a review. So just a suggestion and an endorsement.
Thank you, Wendy. I'm not asking for that this year. I'm just wanting to, to perhaps ask you folk to put that into your thinking processes.
Yep, I'll add it to the final column of that table, which is the out years or proposed audits.
Brilliant.
So,
that'd be great. Thanks, Richard.
I think
those you may want to comment on any of those, but those are my general thoughts for a process which I thought looked pretty darn good. Okay, well, thank you for that. So that's got us through the question time in terms of both the reports done and also the work program. I'd like to suggest that I seek whether we've got a motion, a person prepared to move the motions, then we can have a debate on the paper as a whole. I'm happy to move these, by the way, but there is a point in red there which is an addition. I'll be honest, this has been sponsored by a discussion outside the meeting from Diane, who was prepared to had prepared by reading the papers, and I think it's quite important that the fourth one is that we receive the streetlight fault response review, which is what we're doing today, and that we endorse the recommended actions, including additional action of early escalation to management and elected members of any significant operational risks and issues. So I think that's acknowledging we have an event, which actually also has, I guess, some risk around it as well. So it's not just actually that the recommendations are followed through on, but actually, if as we go through this process, something is heightened, there is material risk or an event occurring, the committee should be well aware of it. So I want to add that as a level. Yes, Tony? You'll move that? Thank you. Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Laurie. Certainly, yeah, sure.
Yeah, I would like officers' advice on the amendment and that they are comfortable with what is being recommended. Thank you.
Yes, we wrote it, so it's fine.
Just fair to check.
Thank you for that check, Laurie. Well done. So do I have a seconder? Thank you, Liz. Right, I'm open to debate on the motion and the paper at hand.
Yeah, so if as the mover,
Yes.
So first of all, I think this is a good report. I think there's a lot in this report, and you know, it's not just an update report. It's got the future work plan, it's got the lighting review, and one of the new things which hasn't mentioned anything is the elected members' gift register. So people are welcome to keep a track on who's reporting all the wonderful stuff that we're receiving, which is actually, if you look at the number of members who have none, you know, it's just not that many. So one little thing about that amendment, can we make the report capitalised, please? Because it's the name of a report.
Streetlight fault. It's review. Okay, I'm sure we can do that.
I think this is a good report. I think that the city faced a big issue, and of course one of the most important things is when we had this issue around the street lighting is, of course, getting on top of fixing it. And I know that they reacted once they realised the significance of the issue. They reacted very quickly. They came up with a program. They came very quickly up with a priority to get on with it, and they didn't even stop, apparently, to ask councillors for the money. They just started doing it, and that's the right reaction when you have a health and safety risk at this level. This is a look at where the gaps were in the process, and I think it's a pretty honest review. I mean, you can criticise these reviews easily, I think, because it's actually hard for an organisation to be honest, but I, as I mentioned before, I think this is a pretty honest report. There's some things in there which are a little bit blunt in some ways, officers who are responsible, for whose teams are responsible for fixing those gaps have been named. And I think also we've got some direction as to how they're going to fix that. And that, as I said, it will be reported back to us, and hopefully the improved processes will also be reported back through ELT when they're established as part of us. So you know, you can have a risk management framework is as much about culture and attitude as it is about forms and systems. And I think it's quite positive the way that we've tried to be very honest and timely about this to give some assurance that not only does the council deal with the specific risk, but we recognise that when we've got gaps, we're going to close them in process terms so that people are kept safe. And so for that reason, I'm moving and I move this report.
Thank you, Tony. Liz, is there anything you would like to add? Sue? Okay. Iona.
Thank you. So look, I just want to reflect on the street light issue. And for me, this isn't about a witch hunt or about fingering particular individuals. That's it's not really the point. But I do want to start with a point that the public may well be worried about authorities in this country. Our ferry, if it gets into trouble, could end up with bodies on the south coast because we haven't even got a tug to pull it. We found out we hadn't been fluoridating our water. We weren't aware that our water systems were so bad. We have this issue coming to us. There's just a number of the bus services. Oh, that's right, the buses don't work at the moment too. There's quite a lot of things going on at the moment which aren't working. Now, the priority, of course, must be to fix things, you know, and to do it constructively and to do it effectively. But nevertheless, there is a point at which the public have a right to expect often highly paid people, including us, to do the best that we can. And I think, while I agree with my colleagues' comments, I think it's a pretty light report. I think more could have been done to look at the whole organisational culture and the structures and the way we manage risk overall. I think it should have had a name on it. Someone should have been said, I did this, and because I'm, you know, as a big champion of public transparency. So, you know, this problem is going to cost the ratepayer millions of dollars. So I think it is right that there is a discussion about it, that there is a more than just that we receive the report. Look, I'm not going to move any amendments, you know, I think it's helpful of Councillor Calvert to have done this. But really, I think we have to be accountable collectively. And my point is, what else, I think, is a fair enough question, you know. So, you know, this committee really does have a heavy load to lift. And so I'm hoping, obviously, that this will help us with our work too, just to make sure that we do maintain high standards, which is why some of my amendments are coming to the next paper. It is a big responsibility, you know, and it lays heavy. And, you know, we started off with a joke about the weather in Auckland, but I am grim-faced. There is a dead child there because an authority, potentially, I know we don't know, but because someone didn't make the right decision. There are consequences when we don't make the right decision, and we have to, you know, really take those responsibilities seriously. So, you know, I'm not actually that happy, as you can possibly see. I think it's fine to be, look, we have to be constructive, but you know, it's just a message to all of us that we need to do better. So I look forward to the rest of this meeting where we can continue to do just that. Kia ora.
Thank you, Iona. Any other points people would like to make? Yes, Ray.
Thanks, Iona. I'd like to comment on that. I in a lot of ways, I agree with you that we have to be responsible for the things that we're doing, and we have to keep learning from things that have happened, and some of those examples aren't necessarily in Wellington, but they can be, as you say, in Auckland. And so we need to understand exactly what happens in other places, and so what would we have done in those circumstances. And so we need to learn from those things. So I agree that you know, in this case, I think that the more detail and the more information that we have in these reports, the better. In a lot of I know a lot of times I think that we have too much detail and we get bogged down in that, but in this case, I agree that having a bit more would actually enhance our reports. Thank you.
Thank you, Ray. Any other comments? Tony, right of reply. Is there anything you'd like to say before we go to the vote? Liz, you'd like to?
It's my right of reply. Is it? Yes. Yeah. I just want to say that I've enjoyed the conversation this morning and the comments, and I'm grateful for the report that's been made and been put together. And I don't have a problem with anything that's in that report. I think the questions that have been asked filled the gaps for me, particularly about how we will hear what's happening. So I think that's good. It's going to come through the long-term plan. I like the amendment because it's actually saying that we have reviewed this and that things are going to happen, because one of the biggest concerns was not escalating escalating the issue when we realised that it was happening. I think it's a bit naughty of you, Councillor Pennant, to be using the death of a child this morning to try and grandstand. I feel what has happened. It's really easy to criticise.
What's the point of order, please?
So I do just find that I do find it a little bit offensive. I feel very deeply about the safety of all people in this country, so I don't think I was grandstanding.
What's the point of order?
So I find it offensive that you called me that I was grandstanding. It wasn't. That's not the way I work.
I'm happy to retract that. It wasn't meant to offend you, but it did offend me as well. It offended me that you used that.
Right.
And I won't say anything more about that, because my point really is more around the fact that it's really easy for people to criticise. But as a council, I think that it's more purposeful if we are collective in trying to resolve the issue. And I feel that that's the review that's been done, the amendments that are here, that's a better track for us to be going down. And thank you for being really honest with the report, and Councillor Randall for picking that up, because sometimes it is a bit hard to be honest, but I guess we've had so many eyes on this issue, and we'll be the first ones to say that, yeah, we stuffed up. And I did say to you that, I was in the UK, I was in London and heard about this. So, yeah, we got a bit of egg on our face, but I think that these are good steps. These are good steps that we're putting in place to fix it, but more importantly, to make sure that it doesn't happen again. And when it does happen, that we fix it, we pick it up, because I think that was the real weakness. So finding the gaps in the report, thank you.
Tony.
So first of all, I want to thank Councillor Pennant and Chung for pointing out some shortfalls. I tend to agree, actually, but I also understand that when you do these reports, we need, as part of our role, to let the team make these calls about how they're going to deal with this. And they made some calls. They were decisive, and I think they possibly traded timeliness for detail. We could have waited until September to our next meeting, and then got an understanding of how the process gaps that were identified were formally reported and what's going to be done about it. I think it was important, in fact, to make it to this meeting, to give some assurance to the public. And also, I think in terms of our ongoing program to support the risk management framework maturity, we need to trust the team to a certain extent to make these calls and then call them out. I think they've been listening. I agree. I think there's some details that could be done better, even though they obviously did a big effort. And I think they'll hopefully take that on board. In terms of the comments from Councillor Pennant, I don't have a problem, in fact, because we're talking about health and safety, and I too think that it's got to be dealt with with public safety. We've got to take it seriously, because Councillor Pennant is right that we need to deal with, and that's the main finding of this report, we need to deal with near-miss issues where people could get seriously hurt as if someone got hurt. And so I think that overall it's a good report. Overall it's an honest report, and I think there's some findings, some direction, and so I think we're on the right foot to go forward, and we're on the right foot in terms of our risk profile, our risk management program. And so overall, I'm going to support the team and this report. Thanks.
Right, thank you for that, and thank you for the debate. I appreciate that. I would like to move to the recommendations 1 through 4, which I will take as a whole. And I'd ask you to take your voting machines and please vote for, as you choose to, for the... No, I don't. I hate them. I hate them. I can assure you that. Thank you. So the motion is carried. That's great. Sorry, was there a chance for morning tea now? Yeah. Look, I'd like to suggest a break. I just want to make a point. I didn't actually rule on the point of order. You did raise one. I just want to reflect that actually I appreciate the general tenor of the conversation, and I want to reflect that it is a matter which you as individual councillors and collectively have had on your plate for a while now, and we are quite rightly shifting it home to public safety. So I appreciate the sense of feeling and emotion, and I'm glad ultimately that we have perhaps pulled back a wee bit. But it also means, Rich, as you can see, that in the process this is something of real interest is the wrong word, but it is close to the heart of the elected membership. So I trust that we will treat these recommendations and the steps that we need to take and the information flow in that light. Right, can I have a break, please? Let's do it for 10 minutes. You've done well. It's been a challenging item, which is needed to be. Can we be back, please, at 22? the work so far this morning. Welcome to Diane. I have tried to encourage Tim to come to the table as well, but he's resistant. Which is fine. I'm trying to shame him here, but he hasn't. He's not biting. So fair enough. So welcome, Diane and Ray. You've come in halfway through, as we noted. We had taken an apology for you. So welcome to the meeting, and thank you already for your. So, Kim and Rick. Order, he says. Kim, if we could move into your paper, please, or Rich, I'd be very keen to let you lead off, please. No? Oh, okay. Oh, you've got, sorry.
Yeah. Kia ora tātou, everyone. I'll take the main paper as read, but just note that, and I'm happy to answer any questions on the risk management work plan or the strategic risk update, but just, of course, there has been some additional information sent out since the 1st of May workshop where we discussed risk appetite statements. And we did try to send that out in advance so you'd have some time to have a look at it, but it was yesterday, so we're happy to go through the slides as well today, and hopefully some of you have had a chance to have a look at them. If not, we'll go through one by one, and that's the results of the risk appetite survey that was requested on 1st of May to try and capture greater participation. And we did get 12 people participating in that follow-up survey, so thank you all for those who did participate, even if you'd previously double points, thank you. So what we have presented in that, and we'll get to it when we have the conversation, but just a few things to note, is that we did come out with 5 clear majority statements, and that's including the 4 that are in the paper, but one additional one came out in the Slido. That's, we'll get to that when we come to the papers, the slides. There was one where we had really no clear trend or agreement at all, and that's the environment one. And then a couple of other things to note, I suppose. The additional one that we did get the rating on, I'm sorry, I don't have it here. We'll get to it on the slides, apologies. I'm a little bit discombobulated, I'm sorry. So for the other thing to note is for the Mana Whenua Partnerships Relationship one, we did get a trend, but I just want to note that the trend is not consistent with the work to date on the LTP priorities. And because the risk appetite statements are more of a cultural statement, or this is how we will approach risk and the risks and opportunities that will weigh and balance, that we would expect any work on the LTP to take precedence. And if the risk appetite statement that you come up with is inconsistent with one of the approaches that's listed in the draft for consultation on the LTP, we would expect that that might not be one that you would want to put forward, even though we're saying, well, we recommend if you've got approval in these statements that they do go up to the council. But just to note that, yeah, there is a bit of inconsistency there with that one in particular, and the LTP is clearly a binding document with considerable consultation, and that should always take precedent over risk appetites, which are much more of a guiding reference for you. So that's probably it. I think if we've got any questions about the risk management work plan or the update, I'm happy to go with those, or we could go straight to the risk appetite presentation if you'd like to go there.
Why don't we just check, are there any questions on your paper? But then I think obviously your presentation, Slido, sort of is moving us into the real oil from the presentation. So, Iona, you've got a question.
Yeah, it's just about AI. I appreciate you were doing some more work on it, right? So it's obviously a big emerging issue. But at some point it seems to be sort of just talking about all the benefits, but not the costs. I mean, it seems to me that technology could potentially replace practically the whole of the council workforce, maybe even councillors. So is I guess the question is, you will look at the threats as well, and how are we going to control it so people still have work to do in future generations?
It's very early on our radar, I guess I'd say, for the risk management. We're aware there's a lot of conversations going on at the moment around governance of AI, the role it plays in the workplace. whether there could be implications, say, for public participation in terms of how we'll know about validity of engagement and things like that. So at the moment we're just flagging it as an emerging risk for the council because it's not technically a part of the work that we're doing right now in a large way, except for some, I think, data processing things and digital systems. But it is something that we will be looking at as part of our strategic risk framework, and I think in particular the new risk profile around workforce constraints and the future of work. It'll be an area that we'll look at what does this actually mean for us as an organisation and how it plays into other areas. It's an influencing trend, and we'll need to do work with other experts across the council really who have a much greater understanding of the implications of AI than I do. So they'll be working more with the people in our smart council area who have that greater understanding. So yes, we're not at this stage saying that it's without risk. It's just we haven't actually got into much detail of looking at what it means for the council yet. We know it's something that we will have to consider.
Thank you, Anna. Very interesting question, and absolutely agree that we need to think about what it does mean. And then you've indicated not just for actually how we do our work, but potentially for the way in which it could affect things like our consultation and participation processes. Any other questions at this stage? Feels like I need to get to Slido. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry. I got a bit excited about it, so got kind of in front of myself.
I'm glad you're excited. You're allowed to be.
So Marcella, if you could please bring up the slides. Oh, and I have a clicker. So can you go to the first slide, please? Okay.
What after Marcella, the clicker? Oh, you got
Thank you.
Brilliant.
Yep, I have the power. Thanks, Bruce. So really what we are here for today is to say, well, how will we use the risk appetite statements, and are you comfortable advancing some of these to the council for discussion and possible approval as statements for Wellington City Council, saying this is how we feel about risk and opportunity and how we will weigh and balance these in our work. And really as a guide for officers in terms of which are the things that we should be putting more attention and focus on for you in our reporting and can help us guide as we develop our work plans. So we have made the recommendation that the statements with clear majorities based on the results of the workshop and the Slidos should go up to the council for your discussion, and at that point there will be decisions about whether they are approved. And also we've identified the ones that have now come out with clear trends, which is to say cautious flexible or averse cautious. We've got that majority view and those aligned ones. So as I said, we've got 5 statements with majority support, and then there was 11 presented to you, and then 5 others that have trends or range statements with support. And so first off, here are the ones with the majority support. And I would note at this time that we have had some suggestions for wording changes come through from Councillor Pannett, and we're reasonably comfortable with 3 of those, and there's one we'd probably would say that it looks like it does tip the dial a little bit on where it sits on the spectrum. So for staff health and safety, this was the agreed majority view, and that has been consistent throughout the in-person workshop and the surveys, that the majority view is cautious. Transparency and public participation, this is one Councillor Pannett suggested some minor changes to the wordings. We were very comfortable with that. That came out as a cautious majority. And then the other 3 that came out with strong majorities, private and sensitive data, apologies, that's the new one that came out with a strong majority in the last Slido. Reputation and perception, so this one we had a strong majority for flexible, so and that is the one that the suggestions the officers would not support because it did seem to tip it from that flexible statement into a more cautious approach, and we did give get a clear signal from the majority of councillors that you were wanting a flexible appetite for reputation and perception. Private and sensitive data, yes, we had a majority there for cautious. And then for the strategic partnerships such as government, other councils, key agencies, excluding mana whenua, a cautious appetite. So there's one new one there that you wouldn't have seen in the paper, and that's the private and sensitive data, and that includes privileged information as well. So here's the results of the survey for those other 7, and you can see that majority sitting at the bottom for the sensitive data and the trends outlined in the orange. Yeah, and it's actually a little bit different than some of the earlier results. The main change has been in the mana whenua partnership one, and that's where we've flagged that it is a little bit out of sync with what you've seen in the LTP approach draft for consultation. And the environmental one, no clear trend at all. So the decision then for this committee is for the merged statements that you requested we put together, which I'll show you now. Whoops, one of the screens went. You can see if you feel comfortable with then advancing those to the council as well. So.
Yes, while you're doing that, Sarah, then Rebecca.
Yep.
So sorry if I have missed it, but what's going to be the approach to environment with even split across 3 categories pretty much? What's your suggested approach with that one?
I would suggest that we don't really have a council appetite view on this one. So if we don't get a majority, I don't think it would be valid to advance it to the council. But that doesn't mean we have to give up altogether. It may be that more work might be needed, or once the LTP work comes out, a clearer position arises.
So it's a question that might be worth answering again at some other point, asking again at some point.
Yeah, the appetite is not set in stone. It's something we would expect to change over time, depending on basically the will of the council, really, and definitely we would expect it to change after each election, but also annually we would expect to review these. But if there's a appetite to look at this again before next year in terms of just can we set an appetite for environment, then risk management team is willing to do that.
Rebecca, you had a...
I did. My question, I guess, is around, no offence, Iona, I'll start by saying that, but the words changed where we've all given a view on a particular wording, and even if you're comfortable with that, all councillors have actually expressed a view on the wording that was presented to us. I'm not a member of this committee and I don't vote, but it seems to me a slightly strange process to change the words on the recommendation of one councillor at this point.
Okay, we can come back to that. Neriden, then Ray.
Cool. I think it's good in one of the areas you are not recommending, especially the community health and safety. And I'm just trying to compare that, the staff health and safety, how we say it. Actually, it was 71% at some stage, and now it's at least 50% is flexible. And what that even means when we say we are cautious about staff health and safety, and whether it's workplace and out of work, what exactly are we talking about?
I'll just bring that one up back on the board for you, councillor. So here's the statement about staff health and safety and the cautious rating, which is different than the community health and safety because our responsibility is a little bit different as an employer, and I suspect that's what's driven the voting, but you are the ones who made the ratings. So there was a very strong view amongst elected members that we would say that we would have a cautious approach to staff health and safety. That is, we were not completely averse, acknowledging work at the council that is inherently more hazardous, and we do have to take some risk in order to achieve our outcomes, but we had a cautious approach. With the community health and safety one, there was quite a rich conversation, I think, at the in-person workshop about what that meant and personal responsibility and the council's influence over health and safety, and that's the way the voting fell. So it is a different appetite, and I guess you'll have to ask your colleagues why they voted the way they did.
I'd actually ask Meredith to comment on the staff health and safety, because I think, as Kim has said, it is different to public health and safety.
Kia ora, Councillor. So you'll recall that we also talked about the due diligence of officers under the Health and Safety at Work Act, and that's primarily what is driving the staff health and safety assertion here, and the requirements that we have as a good employer, but also for you as officers under the Act. So this is more specific to that particular piece of legislation. And noting in the workshop, we talked about the fact that open is not meaning that we don't take that seriously, that at the very minimum is the legislation, and under the legislation it is incredibly serious around our duties of due diligence. This has taken it even higher around councillors' views of what they would like to see over and above the minimum, which is the legislation. Does that help?
Yes, my only question would be what that means from what we currently do in going forward, because we do a lot of things, and what that means. Just give me an example and how that gonna change on the ground.
Sure. Just remembering this is the risk appetite statement, so it's not to say that we're not already doing that. We also take this incredibly seriously, and for me, the legislation isn't a benchmark or a target. And as a good employer, we're always going to aim higher. So that's what we're doing with the maturity level uplift that we're doing in health and safety, that we report on to you as well, and making sure that we take every opportunity we can to ensure that our staff and visitors to the site and our contractors go home better off than when they came to the council. So we'll also take you through the health and safety strategy in June. That also highlights what we're doing around this. That'll give you a lot more information as well, what we're doing above and beyond the minimum requirements of the legislation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Niran. I've got Ray, then Wendy, then Iona, and then Diane.
Great, thanks. Thanks very much for this. Just going back to your previous slide on the financial or capital budget. Sorry. Yep. Capital budget and our appetite for risk and finance. Now, I realise and acknowledge that things change, sort of almost daily. So we may change our opinions on things depending on, what information actually comes through on that day. In the last couple of days, or yesterday, we had a presentation on our financial state, and the day before that, I think, was a lot of publicity in the media regarding our downgrading from Standard & Poor's. Now, this may, these things may actually affect the way we think about things and our appetite for looking at these. So, and I understand that these are just an indication of what you're proposing and just an indication of what we had on that particular day. But I think that when we actually look at it, do you think that these factors would actually affect our rating on these, or how councillors actually worked on that at that time?
Thank you, Councillor Chung. This one's a little unusual because we've never had a clear majority, I think, across all of the workshops and the surveys. And while there is a trend, I guess it's not particularly strong trend. So, and it may change. I wouldn't expect your appetites to stay static, but this is a big long-term position. I think debt and insurance headroom. It's quite a large one. So I think it may change after you do your LTP work. But this one has had quite diversity of views right from the start. So it may be one that this committee feels maybe we're not ready to put this up to the council, or it may not add value, and the LTP is really showing where your appetite lands.
Perhaps I could just add to what Kim said. Ray, I think you might have been out of the room when we were talking about another related issue, but really the financial strategy is the place for getting that certainty around what the council's position is on its capex and its insurance and some of the tolerances that it's got around levels of rates and all those sorts of things. So that, I think, as Kim just said, I think it'd be probably better to hold off on that particular one until we've actually done that work, so that you've got, you've actually got certainty from a financial strategy perspective. Because actually the reality is that looking across that range of views is probably going to be less helpful to have that kind of statement spread across that many kind of definitions. And I think it will come through as part of that financial strategy work, which, we're on that journey. We're starting. Yeah.
Right. Thank you for that. So just to remind Wendy, Iona, Diane, Tony, Ben, who's online, by the way. I hadn't realised that. Ben, welcome. And then I've got Sarah. So we've got a wee bit to get through. So I had Wendy next, please.
I'll be brief then. Sorry, just back to the staff health and safety, and you might have potentially answered my question, and I guess at the start just acknowledge that this is something that I'm already joining. There's a whole rich conversation that's clearly gone on, and I look forward to understanding that better. But it was around the use of the word staff in the context of the health and safety legislation, and how this risk appetite integrates into the workplace and sort of that responsibility to contractors and the PCBU communication and coordination. I think you may have answered that, but I still ask the question just to make sure I understand why the word staff was chosen, if you like, in setting this risk appetite statement in that way.
The word staff as opposed to what?
Well, whether it incorporates contractors and that wider responsibilities under the health and safety legislation.
Yeah, so the definition around worker also includes contractors under the Health and Safety at Work Act.
Yeah.
So, and we have the same duty of due diligence for those that come in to our workplace, remembering it's a place of work that we are measuring and making sure that we have.
No, the question was really whether it was intentional, the staff versus the worker. But that's fine. Yep.
Wendy, Iona?
Really questions for Stephen. It's a process. As you're aware, workshops are not decision-making bodies, so that's the reason I've brought amendments today, and I thought they were reasonably minor, but I will speak to why they've been put there. The question really is whether if people are uncomfortable, it could be just referred straight to council and then we have a proper debate, because I think it's actually appropriate that all councillors actually have a say on these. These are really important. So that was the first question. The second question was just around, given I come from a consensus background, sometimes you just need to keep talking when you don't have consensus. So is there a process that could be devised where we have another conversation? So those are the two questions.
Thanks for that question, Councillor Pennant. I think the first thing I'd say is totally agree that the workshops are not a decision-making kind of forum. So what we've been trying to do is through those workshops and through the online tool was pretty much try and get some, we'll call it consensus, so that when it does come to council, you're kind of not having to debate that kind of in an absence to having had that conversation. So it's really a mechanism to try and narrow down the areas of maybe disagreement, so that by the time it gets to council, it's being well thought through and well talked about. But really, just to take up on your point, by majority decision of council, that is how decisions are made around this table. So something like risk, though, we've really, I guess, tried hard to make sure that we get more than just a simple majority, because it's so important, really, to make sure that we do best as we can get all councillors agreeing. But in the end, it will go through as a report, and council will need to adopt it based on how you vote on everything else. That's the way it'll be done.
So it could be made clear, if my amendments go through, it could be made clear which ones. So I've sent all councillors the changes.
Yes, and I think that, as Kim said, we quickly looked at it this morning, and all but that one, are fine from our perspective. But again, that probably comes back to what you as decision makers think of those changes. That's pretty much the way it would happen.
If there is interest, I shouldn't use the word, and appetite for looking further, I think you're talking about the environment one, to try and get agreement. The finance one probably does need to wait till some of these other key strategies and things play out, so the appetite can sit around variance from what we have listed in the strategy or in the LTP. It's useful to frame things around a variance or around a plan you've already got. That's why we're waiting for the level of service work to play out as well in terms of services to the public and critical services. I'm happy to do more on this with you if there is capacity in your workload and there is interest. I'm aware we've already done 2 surveys and a workshop, so I want to not have another session where we don't get agreement if it's just going to be taking your time. So I think it might be something that you would want to discuss yourselves.
The other thing I'd say is that it's not a once and done. It's like, because we don't have any risk appetite statements at the moment, this is a first step, and it's not to say that you adopt these now and they are set in stone and you don't revisit them, because it needs to be an ongoing conversation. And Bruce, I'm not sure how often you think that the council should revisit it, but it could be 6 monthly, it could be annually, whatever time period that you suggest. But looking at the report that Kim's put together, she's saying here are some that we could or council could adopt now. Others come later, and obviously the environment one needs further conversation, more work. So I think my advice would be put forward the ones where it's it's pretty clear, but kind of not get tied in a knot over others. You can kind of put them forward when the work's been done, when things are more settled, post the kind of processes that we've talked about.
I wonder if I could make a comment. You raise a really good point, and I think I start from this position that it's council's prerogative to set the risk appetite, and we're doing the hard yards for them. So it's our role to recommend a risk appetite adoption for council. So it does worry me we haven't got one round environment. Because actually it's our role to find what we think is initially a risk appetite. I think for the sake of getting us to the starting line that you're talking about, Stephen, I think at this stage, given we possibly aren't going to do this today, we need to reflect to council this is a challenging area and we haven't got. Well, actually, I think we have to reflect what we have got, which is a range of views across the descriptors as we actually have. But Stephen's point is well made. You would normally only review risk appetite once a year. Okay, when we also do a review of actually are these still our strategic risks. But in reality, I'll be expecting Kim and her team to report our strategic risks quarterly against those risk appetite. Because actually you want to know that the controls and the mitigations we have in place give us a sense that we are within those risk appetite statements, which ultimately mean, in effect, you're revisiting those risk appetites every quarter. So I'm reasonably relaxed in one sense. I'm just keen we get to the start line. And I think in this case, we aren't going to solve it today, but we need to reflect to council that we haven't reached an agreement at this point over the environment, and I think we're duty bound to do more work.
Just make that a recommendation, then just add it on.
Let's look at that when we come back to the resolution, but let's keep that in mind, because I think we're reflecting, Iona, we do need to report this to council that we are well, at this point, shall we say, stuck on this. Okay, look, I've got, in fairness, 4 other people. Diane, you're next, please.
Thank you. Can you, just trying to get a sense of how well you think these risk appetite statements reflect the key strategic goals of the organisation? because normally risk appetite is related to your, it reflects at the board level, the governance level, it reflects the strategy of the organisation.
So we've deliberately structured the appetite statements around consequence areas in the enterprise risk framework, because really the strategic appetite for the council was set by things like your LTP and your big funding decisions in terms of strategic direction. So we have deliberately focused on those consequence areas, which are a little bit more tangible and easier to understand and relate a bit more to the controls we have and the approach of the operational work across the council. So it's a guide for us as we're planning to say which risks and benefits should we be weighing up as we make our own plans as officers, and which things should we be reporting on to you more. That's the structure we've chosen that's been supported to date.
So who determined that approach?
We brought it to this committee and it was approved.
Right. So essentially, this risk appetite statements relate to how council officers, management need to look at their work, as opposed to the elected council looking at when we're setting strategy or monitoring strategy, what our risk appetite is.
No, that's not right, Councillor. It applies to both, because, at the end of the day, as we are looking at bringing reports forward, for example, we'll be mindful of those risk appetite statements and calling out things that might be outside of those tolerances. And so that will inform your decision making around particular topics, particular issues, and we're yet to really think through how that might actually impact through the LTP. But it's a joint effort. It's not just about management. It's not about officers kind of taken away into a back room somewhere. It's an active process involving both elected members and staff.
So it's probably similar to Iona's comment about environment, but where are we, say resilience is a key goal of our city. So where do I see that? Where do I see our risk appetite around resilience reflected? I'm just trying to do that a bit of alignment.
I guess the expectation there would be in initiatives that support community health and safety, whether they be through our earthquake-prone building policy or other things that we're doing around land use planning. That is where we'd expect to see capturing initiatives that are taking into account the risk to people in terms of long-term risk from hazards and hazard management, building management, and that's the way it can be reflected to say, well, this, by adopting or by focusing on the, say, earthquake-prone building approach rather than building in certain locations or choices around where we go, we are supporting this, or we're leaning more to this appetite, and we're balancing, say, budget and speed and delivery or the service with the safety. So the outcomes can be reflected there in terms of the risks we're balancing.
I think specifically, though, in respect of that question, Councillor Calvert, at a strategic level as part of the LTP, let's just say resilience is one of the key strategic priorities. There will be, a matching risk assessment against what are the things that can get in the way of achieving, whatever the council decides it wishes to achieve in that space.
But my question, though, is still, if that's the case, then how, like if it's under community health and safety, I don't see anything about that. All I see is about the chance of harm to the public on council-managed sites. So I'm just not seeing that reflected in some of these statements, and wonder how, whether it is, whether we're working at the right level with this, and how would this compare to, say, other councils as well?
Look, I'll just reflect here. Diane, I think I'd like to just intervene here.
Yep.
We are working around risk appetite statements around those matters which we consider strategic risks now. In previous work, we've defined all these areas as our strategic risks. I'm conscious that as time evolves, we may change in our views as to what is strategic risk. And I'd like to reflect that once we have the LTP, that would be a very good time to review whether indeed our strategic risks are indeed strategic risks. And we haven't had that benefit yet, and it will be good to do that. So this is why I say each year we have to review what are our strategic risks first before we then deal with our risk appetite statements. But at the moment, we're dealing with the risk appetite statements for those things which we have determined as a committee up until this stage are our strategic risks. So in terms of process, to try and get through this, we've got to get to that point.
Okay, so just in terms of process, given that this council has still to set its strategic goals for this triennium, is it appropriate, whether this gets approved or not, is it appropriate to then revisit this or wait until this council, the governing body, has determined its strategic goals for this triennium?
I think that was my point. Yes.
And I'm not talking about LTP.
Pardon?
No, I'm not talking about the LTP. I'm talking about a piece of strategy work that's underway.
At the point that council has determined what is its strategic direction and outcomes, which will ultimately be reflected in the LTP. That's the time that we would need to reflect whether we do have an accurate set of strategic risk statements.
Okay.
Tony, I think you've got a point.
Yes. I've got three questions really, or sort of questions and points if you like. But in terms of questions, so first of all, in terms of the environment one, we're so close. Just to fill in that gap, I think some more work between now and perhaps when it goes up to council. I agree with Councillor Pennant, when you have no consensus, keep talking. I think we should make an opportunity. I think it's worthwhile making an opportunity trying to get that over the line, because it could be just, first of all, other councillors aren't involved. Their input may form a majority, you may get a clear direction. In terms of questions, the first question is picking up on Wendy Venta's comment around the staff health and safety. I think that's a little bit confusing, and I'm wondering whether officers would mind if we change the word staff to worker. I think worker is a little broader. I think a worker more clearly covers the role of at least some of the more intimate contractors that are on our premises and this sort of stuff, or as flexible. So any advice on that?
I think it's a good suggestion, so thank you.
Okay.
Happy for Meredith to make the call on that. Thank you.
Yeah. And so the other question is, and this is really to fill in the gap about what the whole point of this thing is. Sorry, Bruce, but I actually disagree with you about these areas. I don't think they are aligned to our strategy. I think the point of a risk framework, risk appetite, is really to provide a high-level direction to all of council around what are our feelings in an area. And I know they may line up to risk things, to risk strategic areas, but in the end, what we want to do is when council is doing something or anything, they want to hold a party at Te Papa or something. And they want to think about reputational risk. They want to think about, we're going to do something a bit different. We're going to have a pink bouncy castle or something. It's all those sort of things where they say, is this right or wrong? It really is a high-level thing. It's a bit of a catch-all. And at the moment, I just want to ask you a question, really, is saying, and it's partly reflecting on what happened, the council does run a risk appetite, but it's just not defined and not endorsed from the formal council. And this process is really trying to get a clearer, crystal clear, written down set of statements across these areas so that you can go down and do your jobs and you can know which things we really want you to keep an eye on and which things we want you to just do your thing outside of the risk. So really, is it right that the council sort of runs on a generally cautious sort of risk approach across the board, and so when that's reflected in the majority, that actually sort of means no change?
That's a really good question, Councillor Randall. I would say that generally in a lot of the areas we are currently already operating at the cautious level, and so where we've seen a bit of kind of overlap into some of those other areas is obviously there's recognition that There can be case by case or circumstances where you might want to do something that's outside that cautious area, so you want the appetite to be a little bit more flexible, perhaps. So, agreed. It is a way of balancing the various risks when things are coming up. So, the financial versus the reputational versus the health and safety, and when papers are going up, and we looked at some retrospective examples in the first workshop where we said, well, looking at this thing, how would it fall on the scale? For example, Pōneke Promise, which was, where did the budget appetite lie? Where did the health and safety appetite lie? And that sort of thing. And there's various risks associated because there's also infrastructure changes and things as well. So it's just a way of looking across and saying, how are we managing or balancing the risks in a realistic way in those consequence areas? And I just want to circle back to the resilience one in terms of we haven't put up the asset related or asset function and service ones yet because we're waiting for the levels of service, and I would expect resilience to also be reflected in those ones as well, because it's about the trade-off between the quality and the cost of the asset and the level of service, and also where we're putting things as well.
Thank you. So I've got Ben, who's online, and then Sarah. Ben?
Sorry, bloody Zoom, unmuting. You've broached it already in the discussion somewhat, but I was just wondering on the back of the workshop we had yesterday, which I'm not sure how across you were, Bruce, whether the capital budget and insurance headroom risk appetite statement is really even worth putting a stake in the ground. We've got such fundamental work and decisions to be made around that. I suppose we can do it, but it would be, in a sense, ultimately meaningless. I was just wondering if it's something we should pursue, or whether that one might need to be put on ice for a little bit.
Look, what I'm hearing from staff advice, Ben, is that this is a work-on area. So the answer is, I think, yes, it's worthwhile working on, but it's actually not ready at this point. If you're going to do the capital stuff in the future, as you've indicated, and it's good that you reminded me of that, Kim, those sorts of discussions are going to happen. But Stephen, you've got some advice.
Yes, Ben, I'd just say kind of hold that thought, and once the financial strategy work's done, then you might well then reinforce that with a risk appetite statement that flows and reflects where you land on the financial strategy.
Sarah.
Well, Ben's actually probably covered off one thing I was going to say. So I've been listening really carefully. I'm not on this committee, but just a few comments. So I know in relation to the changes you want to make, I think that... No, it's the questions. Okay. Yeah. I just was going to say I thought change from critical to important was actually quite a change. The recommendation to review, I think am I wrong in thinking there's a recommendation to review this after the LTP? So something's mentioned about the second quarter of the next financial year would be a good time to review this. I think I saw that in the paper somewhere.
We haven't got any set dates for reviewing the ones that, first they have to be approved by council and adopted in the first place, I suppose, to see do we have some appetite statements. We did want to look at some of the areas that we'd initially discussed in the workshop after some of that level of service LTP work, because it around services to the public and setting appetite statements for that, because it made much more sense to actually have agreement around the levels of service and have the appetites around those. So we would come back to you and do that work after that work's completed. So we haven't got a set date, I suppose, because it's all dependent on the approval of some statements in the first place, and then what this committee would like in terms of scheduling for review.
Okay, and so my third point would be about the capital budget and the insurance headroom. We've actually put some targets there, 40% to 80% it sits at the minute. We should be able, is it possible for us to actually measure what our uninsured asset base actually roughly sits at, and see how close to kui we're at? So I understand we've only got a little bit of headroom now. That's the news from yesterday. So I guess this rounds back a bit on Ben's point. How realistic is a target like that in the light of what we've actually got?
Just ask our treasurer to speak to that one.
Oh, the question was to do with headroom, and currently our appetite for risk in terms of uninsured is that we should have enough reserves to cover 40 to 80% of our uninsured asset base.
Yep.
I would just asking the question, like, what is that kind of figure, and how does it actually relate to the headroom we've got?
Yeah, thanks for the question. I've been sort of sitting back there waiting to jump in on this one. Hey, look, the way the questions were asked was really a little bit of a grouping in this specific one. If we're gonna narrow in on this one, and it really is about your desire and capacity to spend on capital versus our desire to keep that as headroom. Specific numbers at the moment, we hold $270 million of headroom sacrosanct. That number was derived in the 2021 long-term plan. Time has moved on, valuation of assets, and lots of things have moved that suggest that number is no longer adequate. We were talking yesterday about the balance sheet review and the whole lot of other things that are coming to council for discussion at the moment, and there's a lot of dovetailing in this. So it's probably a fair comment that to reach a consensus on this one would be quite difficult because of the varied nature of how the question was asked. But it was done somewhat on purpose to make sure that we know whether we want to be conservative or not.
My question is more about, can we have some, and I think you've answered it, but can we actually know how realistic that current expressed appetite is in relation to our reality? So not whether we've picked the wrong thing, but how does it align with reality right now?
There's also a significant work stream going on through our insurance roadmap, which we'll be talking about later on, as well as the insurance placement that we're doing this year in that space. So lots of influences going on there. Our capacity to insure versus our capacity to, through purchased insurance versus our self-insurance piece, which is it's a key work stream through that roadmap process as well. And these questions will need to be asked in the context of the next long-term plan about where we deploy our capital, how we do it, and sort of what level of retentions we have for an event that impacts the city.
Okay.
This will be a core component to our financial strategy discussion, so we'll commence that discussion next week.
Okay, cool. And the last question, I guess, is I wonder whether we need more risk measures for the health of the city, like the ratepayer base, the number of businesses, the kind of, is there any intention to bring something like that for us to consider? How much do we stress the city, I guess, as a measure of...
I wonder if I just reflect, I'm sorry, we're taking a lot of time over something which I thought was a relatively practical paper. I'd like to comment on that, Sarah, because I think that's really important. That's how you measure success against your strategy. And at the moment, you're going into a process of reworking your strategy. I think that's a really good question for a later stage. And it's one where in fact I like the idea of measures relative to your risk, your strategic risk, and this being really in some sense the discussion sponsored by Diane, as indicators that your risk appetite is being breached. But that's for a different day. I think we're at the point here where we need to work through, if I've got it correct, are these majority statements going to go up to council? And I think, Iona, you've gotten some outstanding recommendations for us to very quickly work through. Do we add these to those statements? Because and then I'm looking for a motion. I think it's in effect what I'm after. So firstly, Iona, and then I got Ray.
Sorry, quick question about process. This obviously we needed way more time today because it's very important we do things properly. So if we've only got an hour to do the rest of the meeting, are you intending to go over time, or are we going to re-adjourn, or are you going to push through everything? And I really don't want to push through things. Sorry, just given all the issues we've got.
Can I be very clear here? At the workshop, we agreed that we would deal with this on the floor of the meeting. We asked Kim to keep Slido open for another round. So it meant that we were automatically pushing ourselves to deal with this morning. So I would take some direction from the committee as to where they want to go. other than the fact that we've got to get it, for the benefit of council, we've got to get this on the road. So that's really why we're here today, where we are, and obviously we're taking a reasonable amount of time, including having gone right back to have we got the right strategic risks. Are there any others? Ray, did you have a quick point, please?
I have two questions. The first one is on health and safety. Now, when these risk assessments that we're actually taking, would they also apply to our contractors, or is it just council staff?
Well, we've had a reasonable discussion on that already, Ray, so I think Meredith's answered that. Thank you. It's about our responsibilities under the Health, Safety and Workplace Act, which is the definition of staff, which we've changed to workers, which means we're a PCBU.
Covers everyone.
Yep. Second question.
Okay. And the second part is, and we've talked back and forth about this, and I'm just wondering, in your experience, have you experienced where we can actually get consensus in a group, or are we always going to be far apart? So that, I mean, should we just continue having workshops until everyone agrees with me? You know, so what do we do?
It's a good rhetorical question, and in fact, you can see in this, Ray, that already we are trying to recognise that there are some differing opinions. The critical point is that we put a line, and these are lines in the sand, so that we have something that actually does provide direction to the organisation, both in a decision-making capacity and also in a management capacity. We've agreed that there's 5 there, that the wording is one that will be a cautious, flexible amalgam, because that's where the majority fall, as in contrast to some of us dealing with it. I think the question in front of us, do we adopt those today and send them up? Recognising there are 1 or 2 still to be done. You've mentioned the capital asset stuff, and actually we've agreed, well, it appears there's a feeling that we've got to work harder on the environment one.
Oh, actually, Bruce, there's 5 with majorities, and there's 5 with majorities in the
That's right, in
combined
that. I realise. So we've got 10
yeah.
out of the 11 that we've been tasked to deal with. The last one is environment, and we've agreed that we need to do more work at a different time. Right? So it seems to me that simply, and I want to respect the good work that Iona did in preparation. There are 4 for which I think you've recommended some suggested wording. Could we look at that? Then I'd like to look at the total package to work out whether I can get a motion on the floor. I am stressed over the time, Iona. I can agree with you on that. Can we get this through, and then we'll look at what can be done in the rest of the meeting.
Would you like to quickly look at the 5 combined ones first, or go straight to the amended wording?
I think what we're looking at is the changes that Councillor Pennant has suggested.
The mover, well, hopefully they can just be adopted, but it might help for me to give a bit of context too.
Can we just
do it
firstly
quickly?
deal with the 3 that the management have indicated that there is agreement over, and we can just look at those quick words. Then there's the 4th one, which I think we probably just need to have a short kairau over as to why management aren't comfortable with that change, please.
Is it possible to have them on the screen?
We're just trying to get a motion up that we have in fact got something to recommend to council. I'm just trying to get the words right. Then we can see that there's a motion on the floor. Then we can have a debate. Some of your hands. What?
So here are the changes that Councillor Pennant has suggested.
Thank you, Stephen. I feel like you're taking us in the right direction, please, if you want to keep going.
Okay. So I think if Kim, you can call out the one where you said that will shift the dial, and that was the one where staff were really just drawing that to your attention, but the rest of it, in our view, was fine to make those changes. But it does come down to this committee's view.
Yeah, exactly right, Stephen. So they are changes, but we couldn't say that they were substantially changing the appetite from one area to another, and it's for this committee to agree on where the appetite lies. But for the last one, the reputation and perception, the additional wording did seem to be more cautious than the flexible that had been agreed, particularly the wording around working hard to maintaining. So it just seemed that, more emphasis, I suppose, and a little bit more cautious than the current flexible description.
Yes, thank you. Welcome to Ilona.
I'll be succinct. So I'm not trying to. I'm happy with where the dial is, staff. So all it was just saying, just given light of the first discussion we had, that we are committed to running our organisation really well. I presume that is what we are all aiming to do. So it was just saying, it's not about talking with the media. That's fine. The important relationship is with the public who elect us and pay to make this organisation work. So that was all it is. I'm happy to have some flexibility around wording, but for me this is actually quite important that we do have that. If our reputation and support is basically reliant on public goodwill and desire for democracy. Kia ora.
Right, and I'm open to discussion on this point, so I take it Liz, and then I've got Tony.
Can I make a suggestion that we move the motion so that at least we can have a debate and we can progress, because we're just going around in circles right now. Through you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, Tony, was there a point you wanted to make, please, before I do that?
No, I support. Sorry,
Kelly, yes.
Point that we should follow the motion, then put the amendment.
Radio. I was trying to do short-circuiting this, and I appreciate we're in a day where we want it a different way, so that's fine. So, can we then now look at the motion, the original unamended motions, please? Yes, you'll move those. Thank you, Tony. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Liz. Appreciate that. Right. So now that we have a motion... Pardon?
So I just want to speak very briefly to the motion.
I appreciate that.
Okay. Because I think there's still some confusion about what risk appetite is about. And so I just want to be clear what we are trying to do here. What we're trying to do is set a clear direction for the level of flexibility or constraint with which we want the council to operate in several key areas. Okay, I think an important role of the risk appetite is actually to give direction to the council in areas which we don't actively oversee, but we want to influence. We want consistency through statements, and the statements that we choose are the statements that all of the business will look at when they want to do something. When they're looking at things like should community groups be trained on chainsaws if they're looking after tracks and that sort of stuff. What are we going to do about building a new playground? That's the key point. It's actually an overall direction. It's a high-level thing, and at the moment we have nothing, so anything we put in place will be better than we've got now. Okay. I also think that we've got consensus, and I really commend the work to get consensus that we should use that, because that actually means we've agreed on something as a council, and then they can get on and do the business. And so on that basis, that's what we're trying to do as a key part of the risk framework to get this established. That I move this. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And as the seconder, I support what this is, and particularly given what Councillor Randall has just said, that this is setting the framework, I guess, for what we're doing. I appreciate that there's been a lot of conversation and a lot of mahi and a lot of thought, Councillor Pannett, into what we're trying to do, but ultimately the final decision is going to be council, so they're going to debate this again. So I'm really quite comfortable with what's up there, and I'll be supporting this, because I think that the amendments that's been talked about can be talked about in council, and further conversations can be held offline to get that consensus, rather than draw it all out right now and then have another hui in full council. That's just my view. So what I'm saying is that I'm supporting what's in front of us, and I'll be voting in support of it.
Thank you. Now I'm open to the debate function. Iona.
So look, just to save time, I'm happy not to put up my amendments today. We'll just do them at council, so everyone can have a say. But I do, but I do want to move an amendment around that we're going to have to word it now. The one about we need to do some more work on some of those things. It's not really acceptable for me to leave the environment one to be silent on that, and even the finance and the financial one. I know some of our colleagues will feel very strongly about that. So are we able? Sorry,
could I?
You said that you're not.
In 5 minutes.
No. We've got to no. This is the one amendment. We've got to say to council that. Now, the question is, what are we going to say? We need to. Yeah. Is it going to come back to this committee to do the work?
Perhaps if you could just give us 5 minutes to draft.
And I'll just and then could I just briefly talk to the work? So then that's all done, and then you've got.
We'll tidy up that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
So we'll adjourn for 5.
No. I was just going to quickly.
Oh, sorry.
Let's just keep going so we can get this done. No. I was just going to talk, just a bit of a chat, and then we can. And then just that one amendment, so we can just keep moving on. Look, I do want to thank the staff for all the work that they've done on this, and obviously it's been a very, very difficult area, and we needed more time today. So now we've learned that 3 hours is not enough for an audit and risk committee, particularly when some of our the people who aren't on the committee are turning up. Councillors and members, sorry.
Can I have order, please? I'm sorry, we've got a lot of voices talking around the table.
Yeah.
Could we just please have a wee bit of order and respect? Thank you.
Yeah, so thank you for that. So, and I do appreciate other people turning up. I think this is actually a very, very, very important committee. And actually, the Regs committee, we're also going to do some heavy lifting tomorrow. Is a very important committee. So, and I think the discussion today has actually been very useful. And I'm really glad that we're doing this risk appetite. I think that is a good thing. And what, of course, is interesting is that it's a personal psychological thing too. I have a very low appetite. You may not be surprised to learn. So. But then other people will stand on other parts of the spectrum. So it's just, it's kind of an interesting discussion to have. So look, it will be good to get that amendment up. I won't speak to it. Again, if we can just say, look, we do need to get to some kind of consensus, and that certainly is where I come from. You just keep talking until you at least get to some kind of view. Look, I will deal with this more at council, but I did feel, for me, language is important, and I feel very, very deeply about protecting life, about exercising our responsibilities as governors towards our staff, and so that's why. And I've worked in an area at council where the deaths happened. The water, the waste infrastructure. This is where, there's a high degree of risk, and frankly, machines doing some of that work will be a good thing from my perspective. So I just hope that we can use these risk appetite statements to reaffirm that, and also just to reaffirm our commitment to the public that we're really, we're not worried about our reputation and whether people think we're good or not, but that we do have the support because we love our city, we want to represent it well, and we want to do the best. And obviously there have been some failures recently, and it's just about trying to improve. So this was the constructive part of the conversation about just trying to improve some of the things that we're doing. But I will, poor iwi, Liz Kelly, I am taking your wise advice. I will talk to colleagues before, and we'll just see if we can get that so it goes through nice and smoothly at council.
Thank you, Iona. I just want to check with my folk on the left as to where we're at with the motion. I can see there has been hard work being done. Diane, you've got a comment in the debate you'd like to make.
Yes, I would. And I agree with the points made about sending it to council, obviously subject to a bit more work. I don't believe going to council on the 1st of June it would be appropriate, because I think there's a bit more work, and I also would like to see us, the elected council, just land this strategy for the next 12 months or so until the next LTP. just to make sure that everything is as aligned as best as possible. Our risk appetite is aligned to obviously our key strategic risks. Our key strategic risks are aligned to our key strategic goals that we want to do over the next, at least over the next 12 months. So I'm happy for it to go to council, but I do not believe it could go to council at the beginning of June, because I don't believe there'll be sufficient time.
Thank you, Diane. Can I just see where we're at with the resolution, because I'm conscious I've got people that have moved and seconded the original motion, but I think we've agreed that we would take the 5 minutes that you folk have taken, thank you, to see whether the next set is relevant, and I want to give you, Tony, Liz, the option to...
And with the leave of the meeting, it could be agreed.
Yeah, right. So pardon?
No, it has been moved.
No, it has been moved. So you want to, okay, we'll go to a formal
rather than an amendment, it could be added in with the leave.
Can we put it up, please, because I can't see it at the moment. I think that's the first issue. Right. Okay, so I will move an amendment to the motion. No.
And you don't actually need to move it as an amendment, Chair, if with the leave of the meeting, your original moving and second.
Well, I took it from what Tony said. He was uncomfortable with doing it that way and wanted a formal amendment. Are you comfortable to consider this, Tony? But you've been part of the conversation. So I am just keen to see whether, in fact, the change, because we had more or less agreed to keep this moving, we needed to send it up. And I appreciate, Iona, that you have sponsored that view. You've got some views. We need to take those into account, but we need to keep things moving.
I thought we were going to do more than the environment one. That was all. No, sorry, I did mention the finance stuff too. We haven't.
We haven't got the finance stuff in front of us. We've got a series of risk statements we are trying to put in front of council.
Sorry, the other risk from over the line, that's all. Right, now I'm going to have to go back and...
Right, so as a mover of the amendment, I think in terms of more time to review that statement, I'd rather use the word to finalise instead of review, because we're actually attempting to take the time to...
That's right.
To finalise the risk statement. If that's the thing, then I agree that that's to that amended substantive and being added to the motion. That's fine.
Brilliant.
Sorry, I'm just trying to find my papers. What were the other ones that we didn't get to consensus on? Because do we need to add those into the amendment?
An adoption of number 3, where we have reference to clause 16 and 17, they are referencing the 10, less the environment, that have majority view, either an outright majority or with a set of statements which recognise the range or the balance between the two. I'm correct in saying that, Kim? I don't want to set the committee wrong.
That's what we recommended.
Yes, that's what this recommendation, a motion from Tony and Liz, is doing. That we are moving on by saying that there are 5, where we are grouped around essentially probably cautious and flexible, as was put up on the screen, and we will reflect that in the wording that goes to council. So in effect, 10 of the 11 that we started with are going up. We're recognising we need more kōrero around environment, and we'll move it from there.
But perhaps just a suggestion, I think it might be worthwhile capturing in the recommendation or in the resolutions what statements are going up, because I look at clause 17 in the actual paper which we referenced there. We've got capital budget and insurance headroom, but of course, this was written at a time that we didn't actually have that those further results. So I just think, just to be clear, we actually itemise or list the 10 that Kim's talking about, so that there's no confusion. And that way, it's really clear for council which ones will come back further in the future, which ones are awaiting LTP and strategy work, etc.
Sorry, and
paper.
Or an editorial note.
So given that we've already had them all spelled out in the presentation from the officers, and in terms of the fact that we're going to redebate and have an opportunity to tweak or adjust the final thing at council, I'm actually quite comfortable with that statement. I mean, we're trying to be, we can get a bit too pristine and we'll end up spending another 10, 15 minutes.
That's
but we've got 10 options. We've called out that the environment one is not finalised. Officers haven't got a clear call, and we've called out that we are going to try and finalise that, and they'll come up as a package to council. And I think it would probably be normal practice to have a workshop on it before it goes to council anyway, so we can actually get briefed on what we're really looking at. Cool. Okay, so I'm actually quite comfortable with this as it is.
Okay, look, I won't have an argument, but what I will have debate about is can I have some officer advice? Because Tony added that in, and we were having email conversation. Why has it been changed from staff health to worker?
That was actually
from Wendy.
Wendy raised that as an issue to be more accurate about actually who we're dealing with.
So all I just want to be does that worker will cover absolute? Well, that actually should even include councillors as well. Includes everything. It's just not a.
So I mean, again, I don't. We can overthink this. This is not a contract. This is not even a specific strategic risk. Yeah. This is a general direction of statements, which is going to be a guide. Yes. There's nothing legally binding to it directly. It's just a guide where we've got a clear direction for the team or the whole council to work to. And so we're just writing down. They haven't got anything at the moment. We're going to write this down. We're going to have another chance to tweak it up when we learn some more and we have some more talk. And so I'm happy. I think it's important now for us to go forward because I think it's close.
Hang on. It's sort of shutting down debate. So I'm actually going to vote against 3. I did ask for some officer advice on it. So anyway, look, we're taking up heaps of time, but that's not Tony. That just came on without any discussion. So
in terms of officer advice, I raised the question during question and answers with the office. No, I'm just answering Councillor Plannett's.
Sorry, it's got me.
I raised the question with officers whether it will be suitable following Wendy Venta's comment, whether it would be suitable, and they were happy with changing the word staff to worker as being more broader and more helpful to them. And the officer advice was that yes, that would be. They approved of that, and they thought it was a better. It was an improvement on that statement because it was broader and it gave them better breadth to cover all of the different people who work in the council and for the council. So the officer advice has been received.
Right, I'm in the position where I would like to draw this to conclusion because we are clearly over time. We have debated this at length. I think it does expose us to some misunderstanding around risk governance, and I think we need to reflect on that one, number one. Number two, we have got a series of statements which, outside of this meeting, we've actually got a reasonable degree of agreement over. And so I would like us to work on the motion. We are in the debates session. Liz, is there any final word as a seconder on this that you'd like to add? Tony, is there anything you'd like to add?
No, I think we're fine.
Thank you. So I'm going to put the motion in, please. If you could.
So can we just take 3A separately, please? Thank you.
So you want to take 3A
so we can do
separately? Yeah.
So we can do everything, vote for that, and then just vote for 3A.
Well, three actually is a totality. So
no. It's been added in, Bruce. Sorry. This is the way we do things. So it's totally fine to vote for 3, which is separate to 3A.
Is it?
No, this has not been a great process.
Okay, we'll do it that way.
Yep.
So this is for 1, 2, 3 in the black, 4 and 5. Can we please use our voting machines?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. The motion is passed. So we'll take us now the separate motion 3A, which is actually the red, which reads, with the exception of the statement relating to environment and with the following changes: A, rename staff health and safety to worker health and safety. Would you please use your gadgets to vote for its adoption or against? So the motion is carried. Thank you very much. Right, we have a very short time left. What is the capacity of the the committee to work through to, it's going to have to be 1 o'clock. Right. So what's my quorum? 4. 4? I want to know who can remain here till 12:30 then, if that's the case. Right, let's see how we go to 12:30 then. We'll keep going. I sense I've got a quorum and I do need to keep moving on. Again, thank you for this morning. It's been robust, to say the least, and I appreciate that actually process has been interesting today. I think it's really important. If I could just ask management as we move into the remaining papers, you can take it as being that they have been read. Could I ask that you just limit your comments to indeed the truly salient points that you want to raise? That would be helpful as we try and push through the agenda before I reach time out. Thank you. So we'll deal with 2.3, which is health and safety. Welcome, you guys. Two or three key points, and I'll ask committee for comments before we deal with the motion.
Thank you, Chair. So just a couple of key points of note before we open for questions. During the 2022 ACC audit, it was recommended that we look into how we can improve recognition initiatives specific to health and safety. The team has worked on a refreshed approach to health and safety recognition, and we're excited to report that the Good Sorts program has been launched. It is a great step in recognising any positive action, big or small, and the influence that it can have on improving our safety culture and uplifting our health and safety maturity across the organisation. So we are excited about that program launch. The second point I just want to make is around the My Safety project. So close to 18 months of work has seen the organisation now transition to a new health and safety technology system, My Safety. The system supports the organisation for reporting and recording health and safety information. Getting positive feedback from users is an encouraging early sign. There has already been a lift in reporting culture as a response, which you will see detailed in the dashboards. Further developments will continue to happen with a number of new modules already planned. Training of the new system for elected members is available in the form of an instructional video, which has been provided to elected members' support. So happy to open to any questions.
Thank you for that brief introduction. Do we have questions for the team that are here? I've got Ben. Sorry, Ben's online first. Ben, you've got first call.
Kia ora. We are doing the health and safety update, right? I came back.
Yes.
Yeah, sorry. Got the little one with me today, so it's a little bit of chaos in here. When I was reading through the report, I just wondered whether, and it might be a Meredith question, whether it's appropriate that we have some consideration of the occupational health and safety risks to staff coming out of the elected members channel. There's that terrible case in Auckland where it was identified suicide. There was a lot of triggers in terms of basically high-level cultural pressure, and I'm conscious that of the real power imbalance that we wield as members. If that's a reporting factor, obviously heavily anonymised to protect the staff member, but if we as a group of elected representatives are behaving in a way that's causing harm, I suppose I would like to know about that in some shape or form.
Thank you for your question, Councillor. We actually traversed this last training around the importance of psychological safety when it comes to that power imbalance, which is accurate, there is a power imbalance. And how do we keep kaimahi psychologically safe? It is important. And as a result, we did draft some guidelines around working in a political environment, because it's also on us to make sure that we're really aware of what that is, make sure we have appropriate training and ways of reporting when there are instances where psychological safety is at risk. So staff can do this through My Safety and sensitive events, and we can report it at a high level. Whether or not the committee would like us to go into PX in future, if there are instances where psychological safety has been reported that meets a threshold, then we'll leave that to you to decide.
Thank you, Ben.
Thank you.
Thank you, Meredith. Appreciate that response. So, and I appreciate your concern. Our actions are important as well, Ben. Iona, you are next, please.
Thanks. Just really quickly, the number of police reports had gone up. Is that just people taking more responsibility and going?
There's a couple of combining factors there. One of them is a better relationship between our security team and the police, and so knowing when we pass on that information. But also, and we've seen this through the personal confrontation reporting, the severity has lifted slightly, and so that's impacted then the police reporting.
Okay. And just, sorry, if I missed something, the graph on health and impairment, it's going up in not a good direction. Is that right?
Yes. So in March, we saw quite a lift in health and impairment, much like we did for asset failure. When we looked at those particular risks, we likened it to, we drilled it down to increased awareness of reporting, and we saw that in the near-miss comparisons as well for the same reporting period. That's the impact of My Safety being launched in the organisation. It's quite a spread. There's no clear single driver other than people reporting more than what they had.
Thank you, Iona. Are there any other? Diane?
I just wonder whether officers would suggest perhaps a summary of this report with any observations from this committee could be referred up to council. Not because of any particular things in this report, but whether it would be useful and to send it up to council so the whole of council got to see the key points.
Just to check, does it not go through Audit and Risk to Council, or has that changed?
Well, no, it just seems to be they receive the information, so it doesn't look like they're passing a resolution to forward it to council. So just maybe it is, but I don't see that.
Okay, well, that's something that Stephen and I can talk about.
Look, Meredith, it would be conventional probably in most councils. Yes, it's a valid risk concern for the committee to be focused on, but given the nature of the duty holders' responsibilities for the entire report to be replicated to council for their information.
Yes, yeah, no, we definitely did that last training. So, so there was a second opportunity to second opportunity to talk about it. That's fine.
It is a second opportunity. I appreciate that. It's just a question. They need to know that the committee here has dealt with it in that sense. Okay, any other questions for? Do I have a mover and a seconder for the motion, please, that we receive the report? Thank you, John. Thank you, Iona. Do you want to speak to your motion, John?
No, because I don't think we have enough time.
Thank you. Iona, is there anything you'd like to say? Is there any debate on the motion? Could you please take your blue clickers and vote, please, to receive the report? Thank you. So the motion is passed. We have Karen Young, our Audit Director, online for the next item. So if staff would like to introduce it very quickly. Karen, I appreciate you waiting. You can see that we're a bit stretched on time, but your report is very readable. So I suspect we don't need to take a lot on explanation, but we do need to have a chance to raise questions. What is it, Karen? I'd just like staff to have a quick opening comment if there is any. Otherwise, I'll come to you, Karen.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. We received the report from Karen a couple of months ago. We've received responses to all the recommendations from other officers, managers across council, and finalised the report with Karen.
Thank you. Right, Karen, the floor is yours. If you'd like to make any, and if I can stress, please, brief comments, I would appreciate that.
Okay. Okay, I'll go straight to the point. There was one thing I wanted to probably point out in addition to the comments the council officer has made. so in prior years, we made recommendations to improve procurement, contract management, project management, programming, and portfolio management. And also, so in relation to policy, practice, and capability of those functions. So pleased to report that when we assessed the revised procurement contract management policies and procedures against accepted good practice, we found them to be good, whereas they were needs improvement previously. There's also a revised plan in place to lift project programming and portfolio management practices and capability. So we thought they were good developments over the last 3 years.
Thank you, Karen. That's very helpful. So, right, I've got questions. I'm sorry that I've cut you reasonably short, Karen, but I appreciate your participating in that. So, firstly, Iona.
First of all, I just want to congratulate you on a very clear and readable report. There's something for us to learn from it, and it's well designed too. Two things. Are you finding Wellington Water improving in terms of the way they're responding so that we can resolve some of these long-standing issues? Obviously, there's been some progress.
Wellington Water has been working with the council to improve systems and process over the capturing of information for the 3 water mandatory measures. By way of example, last year they worked with council to work on improving the information for water loss and the methodology, and as a result we were able to issue a clear opinion over that performance measure, whereas it had been qualified the last 2 years. It needs to continue its focus in this area, and we have made the recommendation to do so.
Okay, and the greenhouse gas emission measurement, are you satisfied with the response that officers came back to you with?
We're satisfied with the response that the council will continue to work on accuracy and completeness of Scope 3 emissions. So Scope 3 emissions are emissions that are not produced by the council. They do not own the assets or carry out those activities, and therefore rely on information from suppliers. It continues to be a challenging area which council are committed to improving the information on.
My apologies, we're just trying to work through our agenda. Thank you for that. Are there any other comments folk would like to raise? Pardon? No, I'd like to just, we haven't got to the motion yet. I just want us to pause for a moment. It's worthwhile. Iona, I agree with your point that Karen's report is very clear, and I want us to be clear on what a couple of things that she is actually saying. And I would want to reflect on her comments around the control environment. And I think this is important because Karen's work is one area of assurance that we as a committee can take. And it's essentially, if I can find my right place on this, if you look at pages 72 of your agenda onwards, there is a strong set of positive assurance about our control environment and specific systems. Now, that's not taking away that there are some recommendations, but overall, our external auditor's view is that that is incredibly positive. So I think that is really the case. I did have a question, which was around the comments about the RID and whether in fact we were agreeing with Karen's recommendations, or in effect we're saying it's either covered or we were disagreeing. Can anybody help me there with that question? RIDs help me understand that we've got revenue from our rating base right. I want to make certain that we have got a secure RID. A rating information database. Sorry for use of the acronym. It's the record of our ratepayers and on which we base our rating information. Help me with that, please.
I'm just going to the comment to make sure that I'm not misleading the committee.
Thank you.
Which is appropriate to do so. Have you got the...
Oh, sorry. Look, I'm happy to take it. Did somebody ask me to take that offline? Did I hear that?
Look, I'm happy to follow that up.
Yeah. Can you look at it? I'm happy to raise that with you a wee bit later.
Yeah.
Thank you. What was that? Sorry, Tony?
Sorry, it's on page 68 of the report. Report.
Yeah.
Not a comment.
Yeah, sorry. It's actually, you're right. Anyway, I'll take that offline. That's absolutely fine. Karen, if I could just also indicate from, again, your good information, there are one or two matters particularly looking towards the future, and you indicated that there were some transactions that will come up probably with the new financial year rather than the past that I'd like us to check on. I'd like us to move, unless there's any other questions, I'd like us to move to the recommendation, please. I wonder if we could have that on the board, which is that we receive the information and we note the content of Audit New Zealand's report to Council. I'll move that from the chair. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Ray. Is there, don't need to debate it any further. Is there any debate on the matter? There being none, I'll ask you to please take your blue clickers and we will vote. Thank you. And we are passed. Thank you, Karen. I appreciate you have waited around at length and I appreciate you being here today.
Well, welcome, Chair. Welcome, everyone. Thank you.
Can we move to item 2.5, please?
Kia ora. This is a noting paper and we will take it as read if there are any questions.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. We like that. Are there any questions? Sorry, Andrew, were you about to say something? No. Is there any questions for the team here? Yes, Diane.
Just a question. I know there's going to be changes. It's in relation to the previous one about greenhouse gas emissions and accounting for that, and just wondering, just in terms of generally about our use of carbon and that, and how that might be impacting on our accounting going forward.
Yep, so as part of the annual plan process, we have said that we'll come back with some information on that, so we will come back to you on that in the near future. We are looking also to make some improvements around our reporting in the annual report, and we'll provide some advice to the elected members on that in the future. That's just to recognise the changing environment. We are not obligated to report additional information, but likes of LGFA will be asking us for information in regards to their reporting, so we'd like to be clear and transparent about our reporting as well. So we're just looking at what improvements we can make. That's going to be a bit of a journey for us, which we will do over time, but we'll still meet our obligations in the meantime.
Thank you. Yes, Tony.
Yes, I just wanted to ask a question about the Three Waters reform update. Is that going to have a significant impact on the insurance side of things, us having to, continue supporting that asset for another 2 years?
Is this a question for
We're dealing with the annual report, Tony. Yeah, no worries. Good question.
Way ahead.
I thought Andrea couldn't recognise the question because we should have been using affordable waters. That's a good thing. Thank you. I think that is a case. By the way, there's also the point that I should note there under 23 about the future transactions. Andrea, I will be keen that we work with Karen to work through what are the probable accounting implications for those transactions and to do that early rather than late in the piece.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, we've noted that.
Figured that. Okay, brilliant. Can we, is anybody prepared to move the motion? Thank you, Wendy. I appreciate that. Have a seconder? Is there any debate thank you, Ray. Is there any debate on the motion? Being none, can you take your clickers and please vote? Thank you. Again, thank you for everybody for the rush thing. So we've got the insurance renewal update, which is reasonably important for us. Thank you, Andrea. But maybe you need to take a wee bit more time with this one. I think this has been of some good interest to councillors. So please, in the way that's helpful, find.
Yeah, happy to, again, it's a noting paper. I can give a brief update in the PX section later on, but if you have any questions on this specific paper, happy to take them now.
Right, Tony, you had a question. I'd be happy for you to raise that shortly.
Yes. Sorry? So, no, I just wanted to know if there's any particular comments you'd make about the changes to water reform, given it's a large asset base and obviously the coverage for that is always significant. Yeah.
So we did allow flexibility for this to be an eventuality through our current insurance renewal. So we've got the three main policies. One of them is specifically dedicated to the below ground assets. Our previous approach would have been to do a 12-month and then a 1-month rollover for our insurance policy. And that decision was done in conjunction with discussions with the DIA. We now will go through to the 31st of May 2024 with the current renewal that we're undertaking, and then we will, in all likelihood, depending on the timing of that transition, then go and do a further 12 months at the, another 12 months worth of costs. That will be, depending on the transition date, it will be factored into the negotiation that we do with the debt on that piece.
Thank you. I've got Iona, then I've got Diane.
Thanks. This is a very important area. Are you confident to tell the public that we've on a good process journey with our insurance, that the city will be adequately protected? Now, obviously, assuming that the government is always going to have to ask to step in, there's no way we will ever be able to insure for a major disaster completely, because people are starting to worry, right, about, yeah.
And I think the messaging came out yesterday. Along with every other council in the country, we're on this journey and insurance coverage as the market pulls away from New Zealand, and we have ongoing capacity constraints across the board with our financing. We need to face into those challenges and make sure that, through the work that we're doing in the roadmap, etc., we make some really good decisions to future-proof our operations, our organisations, our organisation, and to make sure that we do have capacity to stand up the critical assets and services post a large event. Because in reality, in Wellington, that's what we're planning for. There's a lot of questions coming from the insurance market about the resilience in the city, and we're demonstrating, demonstrating that we are willing and able to go and meet those challenges through the resilience program that we're doing, et cetera, So those messages are all really being received very well by the insurance market, and we're demonstrating that through the work we're doing. They're also asking questions about valuations and whether we have adequate valuation uplifts to reflect the value of these assets and how they would be replaced. So there's lots of these conversations going on. I won't sit here and say we have enough insurance, because we know we're not, but we are on a journey to be more strategic about how we manage that.
How long will that take, do you think, the journey?
Look, when we brought the roadmap to this committee in September last year, we were quite honest with the fact that this is a 3 to 6 year program. It's not going to be an overnight fix.
And it makes it very difficult because you've got to also react to what the market is doing. It's a dynamic environment, isn't it? Diane, I think you've got a question.
So, I mean, obviously, how much we spend on insurance and our headroom is also related to how much we're spending generally. So, obviously, how will you take this information back to full council? I mean, because it's obviously here in the audit and risk, but just how will you inform formally council?
So that's going to be through our development of our financial strategy as well, because this is a really core component of the financial strategy as we discussed yesterday, and the balance sheet review. So making sure we have that clear discussion and debate at that level. While we're having a workshop next week on the financial strategy, there'll be future workshops, but that will the parameters around that will be formally agreed by council.
Okay, and just one other question. Obviously, this is just very focused on the city council, but we have a number of CCOs who are also experiencing aspects in insurance. How do you work with them on a similar roadmap?
They are factored into the roadmap. When you go and have a look at that document, there is a work stream there that says we need to engage with each and every one of our CCOs and understand their insurance needs and capacity constraints as well. We have, to date, we've worked with the stadium. They've taken their own decisions in that space. We are actively working with the cable car at the moment to look at those options. There's other CCOs that already have their assets on our portfolio, so we've very much got that in mind as we go through this.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? I'd like to move to the recommendations then, because we note 3 here that there is more to come. So we note the work plan, we agree for the verbal update. Do I have a mover and a seconder for that, please? Thank you, Liz. Thank you, Ray. Any debate? There being none, I'll ask you to take your clickers, please, and vote. That's carried. Thank you very much. Right, if we could then move to the forward work program, that'd be great. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. I'll just take this as read, but given the kind of the pressure today in terms of timing and what have you, I think we'll need to review one, whether or not other meetings are required, but also just how the agenda is structured, etc. But I guess really, well, you just wanted to set out what was on the list of things that would be coming through to that September meeting that's currently scheduled, and to note that there is a workshop planned in June around the annual report, and then obviously other workshops, and potentially may need to be a meeting to recommend through to the council the adoption of the annual report. So I guess that's the key points that I'd want to highlight for the committee.
Right, thank you, Rich. Nothing for you to note at this point. You'll get onto the action tracker. So if we can just reflect 2 things. This is the work program, and it's one that we have developed. And I think in light of today, and I already heard some comments, there is a question about the size actually of the work. And perhaps it's more a case of the time we've allocated to the committee's meeting. I don't think that's a direct response that we can provide today, but I will be talking offline clearly with Stephen about the time. Is there any question or points people would like to make about the forward work program at this stage? Yes, Ayana.
Sorry, Tony, I don't know if you have asked this question, but just the frequency of meetings.
You said that was really what I was acknowledging.
That's what you did say that.
Randy.
So I just didn't quite hear you. Okay, so what should the frequency be? Should it be every 2 months or? Well, I guess some feedback would be, given I think we're trying to have a sharper focus in this area of council, and a lot of other councillors are turning up who aren't on the committee. Maybe that's the feedback. Yeah,
we can certainly take it offline and find a way to have that conversation. But simply to say, the terms of reference provides for quarterly meetings, but the feedback, particularly from Councillor Randall and perhaps some other councillors that isn't often enough. And obviously the chair will have views about that too.
Just a point, if I can just add clarification. Conventionally, I would always say 4+1. So that's the quarterly meeting +1, generally around the annual report. Can I give you an indication? I was chairing Auckland yesterday, but we had a 6-hour meeting. Okay, so there is a balance between the length of time we can devote to any one day and also the number. So, and we were dealing with issues of moment at Auckland yesterday as well, so as we have already this morning. So that's what's in the balance here, and I take your point on that. I'm in a committee that is meeting 6 times a year, but that's because we're actually establishing ourselves and we want to work more closely with management to get things going. So hello, here's a key point that you've made, Iona. We've got to focus. So Tony and then Sarah.
Yes, I mean, I think, first of all, the workload is on this committee, including we've taken on health and safety. It is quite high. I think one of the key issues, particularly with today's meeting, is that we don't meet again until September. I mean, I think it's quite a gap in terms of the year. So, I mean, I guess we'll just deal with it, but it is an issue. I'm happy to take it offline with the appropriate, with the mayor and appropriate councillors around just getting maybe that tweaked up, because I'd rather have shorter, more often meetings, because then people can, if it's a very short meeting, they get, because sometimes audit stuff is a bit review, accept the report, but if there's a real issue, it means that we're not constrained like we are sort of becoming a bit today. So anyway, but it will be a point, just a note for the public, it will be a point that we will be working on while over the next 2 or 3 months, and perhaps come back and sort that out at council level. Thanks.
I think actually, Tony, and given you and I are the chair and deputy, I think we should commit to come back. We've got that workshop, and I think the 29th of June over the pro forma. I think we need to have a decision by then. So I would be very happy that we commit to doing that, mate, so that we can get that one out. Okay, yes, Sarah.
So I'm not on this committee, and the reason I'm coming is because we can't access some of the public excluded stuff anywhere else. And I discovered that, there was some discussions that were incredibly important about our BNZ claim and a few other things that I was hearing secondhand about from people who had been to the meeting. And then I've also asked the CEO if we can have a more robust, to all of council, explanation of our financial risks, and she said no, it's going to be dealt through with the audit and risk meeting. So I'm here not because I particularly want to be, but because if I'm not here, I don't get the information. It may be something just to think about if we're running short of time and extra people are, contributing to that.
Look, thank you for that advice. I mean, essentially it's positive that actually we are doing the right work, but we've got to find the right amount of time, whether that's more meetings, whether that's more time on a particular day to actually deal with it. So I am comforted by that, although a tad stressed by the day. Okay, thank you for that. I think we deal, don't we, with your action tracker before we deal with the full motions, Rich, so perhaps you just quickly whip through the action tracker. Oh, sorry, you're right. Sorry, I was merging two. I was trying to get things together. Can we look at the resolution, which is that we receive the information for the work program, bearing in mind there's some action points that are coming out of it, but I don't think we need to pass that motion. I'll move that from the chair. Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Iona. Can we please use the Bluey to vote? Yeah, Bluey, I'm getting in line with my grandson. No, this is no action tracker is coming. We just don't go away, Rich. This is solely for the work program. Okay, Rich, we got a raise gone. Liz, are you going to vote?
I'd suggest we take it as read, the action tracking.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you. And can we vote? We need to vote though, or are you going to accept? No, we need to vote, so we'll get it right. Can we vote, please, on the action tracking?
Apologies, do we have a mover
somebody
and seconder?
seconded. Yeah. Thank you. Appreciate that, Liz. Thank you, Iona. Here we go. Here we go. Thanks, Emily. Appreciate that. There we go. Councillors, that's got me to the end of the public excluded, and I think we're out of time. Yes, exactly. So there's a cunning plan. So
Chair, what I'd recommend is that you adjourn here at 12:30, and that you reconvene on next Monday at 1 p.m, which I think, according to our calendars, could be done, and it does work with the chair. So that would be to deal with public excluded business.
So perhaps it should be done formally that I move that we adjourn the meeting at. No, but I think
we're going to lose members.
People have to go. Sorry, so somewhat like to stay for food. So look, I'd like to move that we adjourn at 12:30, and that we reconvene on Monday the 15th at 1 p.m. Do I have a second, please? Thank you, Liz. Is there any debate on the motion? Oh, okay. Right. Thank you. Man, I'm struggling with your standing orders today, I can assure you. Okay. So we're moving to adjourn and we're moving to extend the meeting? Yep. Is that all I need to say? Yep. Brilliant. Okay. So I haven't quite got it right. So 1, we are adjourning. 2, we are extending the meeting. We don't actually have that up as a resolution, do we? Do you have to? Can we use Bluey to deal with that? Thanks, Emily. So if you could vote on that, please, that'd be great. Thank you. In that case, I will adjourn the meeting. I think there are 1 or 2 people online. Karen, I'm sorry that we haven't had a chance to if you're still there, to speak to you, and hopefully we can on Monday. Yes. And Ben, thank you for being online as well. It's been a difficult day, hasn't it? But we have actually talked at length and in depth about key issues. So thank you for your participation. And I hope most of you, if not all of you, can be here on Monday afternoon. And that will be great to deal with that. Stephen, thank you for your advice on that, and team. I do appreciate your governance support. So lunch is coming a wee bit later, so if you can stay for lunch, please do. Otherwise, I wish you well with the afternoon. Thank you.